Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Welcome to Financial Issues. I'm your host, Shana. Thanks for tuning in today. We're so glad that you are here. So our purpose as a ministry is to educate and equip the saints to be good stewards with all of the resources that God has trusted us to manage. So we do that in two ways. We call it defunding darkness and funding the light. Defunding darkness has to do with biblically responsible investing, how you manage your portfolio, and funding the light is encouraging you to be joyful, generous, and obedient givers. So we'll get started. On today's show, I'm going to have Jason MacDowell is going to come back in the second segment of the show. We're going to talk more about Trumpenomics. We're also going to get to encouragement from the scriptures and answer some of your questions. So let's start with encouragement from the scriptures. Our stewardship verse today comes from Proverbs 21:6. Getting treasures by a lying tongue is the fleeting fantasy of those who seek death. Maybe we should read that one again.
Wow, yeah.
Getting treasures by a lying tongue is the fleeting fantasy of those who seek death. I never thought about it in that way, but this proverb warns us that gaining wealth through deceitful or dishonest means ultimately futile and destructive results. So it compares with wealth to a fleeting vapor or a deadly snare, emphasizing that dishonest gain leads to ruin rather than success. This is so different than the way that the world tells us what we should value, how we should do things, and what our goals should be. So this warning that cuts right to the heart for the investor who's considering biblically responsible investing. Maybe you've never heard of it until you turned on our program today. But what we can say is that there are companies in corporate America who are using your shareholder dollars to fund ungodly agendas that are pro-death, they're for abortion, they're for promoting the LGBTQ lie. They are investing in companies that commit human rights violations. They are investing in companies that are promoting pornography and anti-family entertainment. So because I love the Lord so much, when I heard about biblically responsible investing, my heart was cut, and I decided that I could no longer be involved in owning companies that were involved in those things that grieve the heart of the Lord. So I did what the Bible tells me to do when I know that what I'm doing is not right and not pleasing to the Lord, and that was to repent. And that's when I adopted a biblically responsible investment strategy. We hope that you'll do that as well. Seth, do you have insight?
Yeah, Shana, I love hearing your testimony with that. I think that's fantastic. And, this verse, the phrase that comes to mind is it's not worth it. It's not worth it to get the wealth if the wealth is by a lying tongue and it's ultimately just going to end up in death. It's not worth it. It's far better to gain the spiritual wealth and to trust that God, being gracious, will give us the things that we need. Absolutely. And sometimes he does choose to bless us with material wealth. And if he does do that, we need to say thank you, praise God for that. But if he does not, we still need to be confident that the best wealth is ours. It's the wealth that's coming in eternity. So yeah, really good stuff here.
It's like giving a 2-year-old a knife. We would never do that.
That's right. That's exactly
God knows what we can handle, and he gives it accordingly.
Amen. That's well said, Shana.
Let's get to some questions.
Yeah, let's do it here. So we've got one that came in on the website, I believe this was. This is George from North Carolina. He's asking about CS85, Shana. He's saying CS85 has some of the prettiest numbers and projected earnings I've seen in quite a while. Is it going to go back on the buy list sometime soon?
Don't have a definitive answer. Not today. Let's just say that. Yeah. This company, their earnings are dependent a lot on an underlying commodity. If you go and read what the company CS85 is, then you'll know really quickly what that commodity is, the prices for that commodity has been coming down. So it's due to an isolated incident in that industry. I'm a little bit hesitant right now. You know, you always hear the old adage, don't catch a falling knife. And the markets have been responding quite drastically to the news that's going on. So I'm a little bit cautious right now. I don't know. I can't say for sure if it will be one that goes back on the list whenever it's time, but it definitely is a hold. And I will say this, if you're a partner, you know, Monday is the day that we do the updates to our buy list. I mean, we can do them anytime throughout the week, so you can periodically check if you want to. If it's something that's earth-shattering, we're going to send out an alert. But and we also post the commentary. So if you're wondering about what's happening in the markets and the economy today, if you're a partner, you can go on and you can read that commentary.
That's great, Shana. Thank you for that. Brian from Missouri is up next here, also on the website, saying, Shana, I'm starting to add some preferred allocation. Is it best to do the 2 to 3 preferred holdings max? And I'm in the growth and income model. What do you think?
So I'm going to say that it depends on what your allocation is in the asset allocation model that you're following. Let's just say, for example, that your asset allocation model calls for 9% for preferreds. Then you want to take the approach of getting 3 different positions with 3% each.
Good stuff, Shana. Jessica from your home state of Texas up next here. Jessica is trying to understand how ETF 7 works. Is this generally correct? So ABC stock pays a 4% dividend. I buy 10 shares of ABC stock, and I also short 10 shares of ABC stock. Whether the stock price goes up or down, I don't gain or lose appreciation, but I still get the dividend payout. Is that how it works?
I think that's a general concept for it, but it's not on a per stock basis. So the fund is made up of about 100 stocks that pay good dividends. So you're kind of stripping out the income, those dividend payments, you're getting that. And then what gives it the market neutral component is that it does have the ability to short the market, so to speak.
Yep. And then one more here from social media, Shana. This was on Facebook. Rex is saying, I'm a member, 56 years old, using the 45 to 55 model, formerly, of course. Now, a point was brought to my attention. I'm still trying to diversify. I'm building my portfolio. And the topic of making sure that I don't have overlap within sectors in order to avoid a heavy downturn within a sector. Is this a thing? If so, how do I keep from overlap within a sector?
Yeah, that's good. So April 1st, that we had already released the new models. Most likely, you're going to fall into that growth and income model. You can go and read the descriptions there on the website on the asset allocation page. There's a real nifty button at the top left that gives you a good description of all of the different portfolios. And just read to make sure, first and foremost, that you're in the right model for you. And so avoiding overlap within the sectors. Yes, that is a thing, I think, because as you're going through, let's say that you're focusing on your energy sector, and maybe you're supposed to have 6% in that sector. You're going to take maybe a 2% position in 3 different stocks. That gives you a total of 6. Now, the way that the energy sector works is depending on what the underlying commodity price is, usually it's oil, different industries are going to do better at different times. So generally speaking, within energy, you have downstream, upstream, and midstream companies that all kind of do different things. You have companies that focus on exploration, and on the opposite end of it, you have companies who refine. You have the refiners, and in the middle, you have kind of the services company that support either the exploration or the transport for the raw material to get to the refinery, and they respond differently to oil prices. So when oil prices go up, refiners tend to do well. When oil prices go down, refiners tend to not do well. So you don't want to have, if you're picking 3 different stocks, you don't want to have all companies who are refiners. So we try to help you, we try to help guide you in that way by what we put onto the buy list. So we try to have a robust offering something in each of the different sectors or each of the different industries, so that you can diversify and allocate properly there.
Awesome, Shana. This might be a quick one here. Gene is saying, what method would you recommend to keep a Roth IRA earnings separately from taxable capital gains stock investments? Gene's 68. She's thankful for your continued expertise, Shana.
I might be misunderstanding the question, but it seems like a simple answer to me. The way that you keep them separate is that you have separate accounts. So you have a Roth account, and that's what designates to the IRS whether or not you pay taxes on your capital gains. So for a Roth, you can buy and sell things, and you're not going to get any kind of capital gain reported to the IRS. If you're in a taxable account, every year those gains, those transactions will be reported to the IRS. So that may be a more simple answer than maybe I misunderstood the question. If I did, you can always re-ask. Well, folks, stay tuned. I've got Jason MacDowell coming back next with me, and we're going to talk some more Trumpenomics. So stick around.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common, the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
My name is Reagan Gardner, and I am in the 4th grade. Last year, I wanted to be like everybody else. I thought I had to act different, look different, and be different to be cool. When I joined Crossroads, I learned that God loves me just the way that I am.
Help reach more kids like Reagan with the hope of the gospel. To learn more about Crossroads Kids Club and how you can get involved, visit reachOurschools.com.
Hi, this is Shana Burt, the host of Financial Issues. Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn logo. Save a baby, save a life.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. I'm your host, Shana Burt. Thanks for tuning in. Well, markets have been almost singularly focused on tariffs for several weeks now, if not longer than that. But I said on Friday's show that we really can't get tunnel vision about these tariffs. We have to remain focused on the 2 more important prongs of Trumpenomics. The first one is reducing government spending. So this means making the consumer, the American taxpayer, the decision maker on how and where our own money is spent. So when we pay taxes and then we let the government decide how to spend it, they do a really bad job. Secondly, making America a great place to do business again. That means reducing regulations and giving businesses a great tax environment, and perhaps that means reducing corporate, or at least keeping corporate taxes the same. So I've invited my friend and colleague Jason MacDowell back to talk Trumpenomics. Jason, let's talk about where we are with the tax cut part first.
Yeah, so I'm going to make myself clear. I want some tax deletion. But I guess what we got on the table is tax cuts, right?
Baby steps.
So right now we have the House resolution budget that had been passed, and now it sits in the Senate. So this is a area where the Senate needs to vote and put something together that mimics what the House has, so that it can be a reconciliation bill to go to President Trump, so it can be signed into law. Now, what the Senate didn't have before was tax cuts in their budget that they voted on when they individually were putting these items together. So John Thune has come out and said on March 25th that the Senate was moving forward on a goal to pass the resolution by April 11th. So this is good. I actually thought, man, I'm expecting maybe by September, because they like to take forever on these things. But April 11th is really good to be looking at this. Now the Senate needs to add the tax cuts in there. So we're hoping to see something before this point of time.
Yep, that would be good. So there are two parts to Congress. What about the House?
Yep. So the House budget resolution allowed for the $4.5 trillion increase in the deficit just from the tax cuts over the next decade. So as long as spending is cut by $1.7 trillion, and that's coming from the DOGE team, of course, if spending is not cut by $1.7 trillion, the cap on tax cuts will be reduced dollar for dollar. So that's telling us now that these tax cuts have a cap, and it's depending on what DOGE can do. So that's what we are all screaming for, right? Is more cutting. If spending is cut by more than $1.7 trillion, so if DOGE goes over and above, which there may be a lag in a lot of the contracts in 2026, we're going to see a lot of the savings done by 2026. So I'm going to set that expectation now that the cap on the tax cuts will be increased by the same.
Yeah. So there are those fake news outlets out there that would say that Elon's done, that he's worn out his welcome, and he's going to be kicked out of his role. But the White House is rejecting a Politico report that Trump has told his advisors and cabinet that Elon will be soon stepping back from his current position and serving in a smaller advisory role. Well, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt pointed out that the story was garbage and Musk called it fake news. I'm not surprised, coming from Politico, since they are somewhat of a DOGE casualty. The $8 million in canceled subscriptions from the government that was going to Politico is a sort of water molecule size drop in the bucket when it comes to saving, the kind of savings that we need from the waste of money spent by the Congress or for of our tax dollars. But apparently it makes more than a ripple in Politico's revenue stream. Maybe we'll find out that it's a good-sized tidal wave rather than just a ripple once many NGOs are funded. I wonder how many of those NGOs had those subscriptions to Politico. And, Trump recently acknowledged that Elon does need to get back to the business of running his own businesses, and that his role in DOGE will eventually be taken up by the cabinet secretaries. But we've all known that it was a temporary role. Even Musk said that going in. And Musk told Fox News last week that he'll have accomplished most of his goals before his special tax status expires. So, Jason, talk about the work that Elon is doing.
Yeah, the great news is if Elon now is no longer taking flack from the media, the DOGE team is still employed by the federal government there. They are still keeping their legal, HR, and engineers in all these agencies looking through. They're going to continue doing work. Just maybe we won't know about it unless Elon goes on Joe Rogan or something, or tips us off somewhere. So that's the DOGE team is trying to meet the standards for cutting in the caps and the tax cuts that will be reduced. But right now, looking at the receipts, a little over 130 billion saved. But like I said before, these contracts, they're making it clear now that these contracts are going to come to rue, if you will, next year in 2026. But Elon has mentioned that they need to save about 4 billion per day. So that's his goal through September. I'm not sure if he was talking about September 2026, because they did have some goals of ending DOGE by 2026, or he means September of this year, 2025, to get to the cut of 1 trillion. So
Yeah,
on
some
a
of
path.
those things are going to take time to work out, if they're canceling leases or, terminating employees. I mentioned on Friday that some of these government employees that are going to lose their jobs are going to be on severance or unemployment for the next, say, 3 to 12 months. So we've got that to work through.
Absolutely. And of course, we're still on the Biden budget until September, right?
That's right.
So
that's right. Trump doesn't get a chance to make his own budget until September of this year. So for those that didn't know, our fiscal year starts October 1st.
So let's go into the other part, tax cuts, but also just a recession of government spending. Economists and analysts are warning. I think a lot of people were hearing a warning of recession in the media. But what is this actually going to look like if there is one? I mentioned in the past a little bit about a paper recession, and really it's just coming from the government cuts in spending and the fact that it's not being included as a measurement for GDP. So knowing why that's going to happen on paper kind of helps ease, hey, what's really going on. The projection by an economist and analyst is looking at a 5% reduction to GDP, and that's specifically going to be coming from, as they report, illegal deportation and the NGOs, as you mentioned. So that's kind of the focus of those two areas of where that cutting is actually happening that can affect the GDP in that case, since the measurement's not there anymore. So the positive side is coming out of a short recession, as they hope, in a decade of economic prosperity, much like the 1950s government spending recession they had. So going back to that, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself exactly, but I thought there were some parallels that I thought was interesting to just mention.
In the 1950s, that's what they say. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Yeah, exactly. So in the 1950s, there was actually multiple recessions. One post-Korean War, which was measured between July 1953 and then May of 1954. So if you got a quarter, right, that's one quarter, so about roughly 3 months in that case. And then, of course, there's the Eisenhower recession from August of 1957 to April of 1958. So those were actual measured 2 quarters of negative GDP growth there, but they were short because to have a recession, you need 2 negative GDP quarters. Otherwise, it's not going to be defined as a recession. So looking at that, that would be defined as a short, deep recession. That's kind of what these the economists and analysts are kind of looking at. Would it be a paper recession? Would it be short? Yes, but coming out of it, there's a lot of positive feedback there. And I'm more of an optimist in that case. So I'd like to kind of rest in that. So with the Eisenhower recession, of course, 1957 to 1958, which is August to April there was a combination of tight monetary policy, a decline in consumer confidence, seems a little bit similar now, and a downturn in the automobile and housing industry. So that might be where everyone's screaming with the tariffs too, but across the board. So the Fed lowered rates in the 1950s or during that Eisenhower recession, while Eisenhower had a combination of low taxes. So let's look at our tax cuts, hopefully now, balanced budgets, so reducing that government spending in 2025 and moving forward with this administration, and public spending allowed the economy to prosper. So during Eisenhower's focus, there was some government spending that was still happening, but it was more for the benefit of the public. So this is why I wouldn't copy it here now in the spending side, because we're trying to reduce government spending. But anything that is spent for the public's benefit, to that, I would probably look at it as a positive. But you kind of have to define it too. So by this 1960s, the economy grew over 37%. And Americans had 30% more purchasing power. So basically, it was the decade that started after all of these. Do I feel like we need a whole decade after 2025 to realize it? No, it's just going to be measured for the next decade on what is going on now that Trump and this administration is doing. They're dismantling all the agencies that are going to have a hard time for the Democrats if they ever get back in office and in power to sew back up, because they can't manage their own lunch money. So how are they going to re-sew up everything that's being dismantled? That's my question. So that's how I kind of look at it. It's more of an optimist view there.
That's a good question. You know, it looks like the market is studying history too, and what the Fed does, because now they're expecting 5 rate cuts by the end of the year, when just a few weeks ago it was just 2. So they're expecting the Fed to step in and save the day again. So granted, our economy looks much different than it did during those years, but I think the point is we have to do something different if we want to get into that golden age. So Jason, boil it down for us really quickly. We have just a minute left. What's going to be required of us to enter that golden age?
Uncle Sam's got to take less. Can we get tax cuts, tax deletion, just move it across the board, just remove it all together, get rid of the IRS, all the things that we all dream about. But the reality is those tax cuts are big for me. Let's also looking into the Fed to stop printing money somehow. Just get them to stop so that Congress can't have unlimited capabilities of spending what the Fed keeps printing. Let's stop those two things however we can as Americans with the administration. And then really just kind of my belief here is, of course, that money not given to Uncle Sam is better used in our pockets as Americans, and specifically an FISM partner. I believe that they're going to spend their money better than the government. They're going to wisely invest it, be biblically responsible, and of course, be found a good and faithful steward.
Amen to all of that. Folks, if you're listening on an outlet that only carries the short version, we wish you a good day. For everyone else, stick around. We've got more financial issues up right after this next break.
Where's Mima? We found out Shepard's diagnosis when I was about 17 weeks pregnant. We learned that he was going to need a series of surgeries after he was born in order to give him what they considered a normal life. And we weren't sure how this worked.
Yeah, very emotional, very, very broken. And as my wife just said, not sure how this worked. And called Samaritan, and they said, you just go have that baby. You leave the rest to us.
And just to hear the confidence on the other end of the phone of this is not something that you need to be concerned about at all. You focus on the health of your family, the health of your baby, and we will walk with you every step of the way.
I found out I was pregnant when I was 21 years old. For me, I was scared, I was shaking. I Googled places to abort. We drive there, and as soon as we get there, I open the door, and the first thing that I see is a bunch of Bible verses in the walls. They gave me a little counseling session, they gave me the pregnancy test again, and they do an ultrasound. And that's when everything changed. When I saw my baby, and when I heard her heartbeat, that was it. We decided with my boyfriend at the time, which is now my husband, to continue the pregnancy together. We started coming to the classes, doing our homework, getting counseling together. We've seen the hand of God ever since we stepped into the pregnancy center.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
My wife and I, we moved into this neighborhood. We had some experience with Crossroads Kids Club. We had served at another club. We kind of thought to ourselves, like, it would be really, really cool for us to actually bring in a club that was able to share the love of Jesus with kids directly into the school. And so we started our Crossroads at Hilltop.
Crossroads is amazing. You can learn all kinds of things about God. That He loves all of us. He died on the cross to pay for our sins. That He will help me in every way.
There is just such tremendous opportunity to reach kids in some of these areas that just aren't being reached.
Sometimes I pray every night. When I feel alone sometimes, God is right there sitting next to me. I can rely on Him no matter what happens.
To learn more about Crossroads Kids Club and how you can get involved, visit reachourschools.com.
Good to be here with you today. I hope you enjoyed that segment with Shana and Jason there, especially on a day like today, folks, with market volatility that we saw over the weekend and is continuing today. Always good to be reminded of our strategy, stay in the course moving forward. And I appreciate the fact that so many of you, I've not really seen much concern at all in the chat, that so many of you are willing to continue on forward in that strategy. I think it's great. Just want to remind you a couple things. Number one, we do want you to ask your questions, put them in the chat. We love to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you and to answer those questions. Also, many of you have let us know different things about the website that have worked for you, that haven't worked. We're getting the kinks worked out. So thrilled to have this new website, and it is really coming along well. So again, if you've got questions about anything on it, reach out to Pat. That's pat@financialissues.org. Pat@financialissues.org. The other way to do it is go to the homepage, click the contact button. Very easy to do there. So I hope that you all are enjoying that new website, playing around with it. It's great to have for sure. All right, folks, let's get to the big news from Friday, which was how the markets finished. So it was I guess you could call it a historically bad day for the markets. They haven't seen a day this bad in several years. It finished a really volatile week, a pretty rough week as well. So Friday was a tough day. By the final bell of the week, here are the numbers. The Dow Jones was down 5.5%. It saw back-to-back losses of at least 1,500 points. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 was creeping up towards 6% down. That was the worst day for the S&P 500 since the institution of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns in March of 2020. So it's been about 5 years since there was a day that bad. The NASDAQ was also creeping up towards 6% in the negative. The NASDAQ did enter bear market territory. It is down now 22% from its record high. Back to the S&P 500 for just a minute here. The S&P 500 did finish Friday down 17%, so it's creeping towards bear market territory. We could see it hit bear market today. Maybe. We'll have to see how the markets are looking. For the week ending April the 4th, the Dow finished down 8%. The S&P 500 finished down 9%. The NASDAQ finished down 10%. Oil was hanging right around $60 a barrel here. So the markets are in a tizzy here, folks, obviously, and you know why. Shana has talked about it. We've talked about it as well. They do not like these tariffs. A lot of this is driven by fear and greed. That should be encouraging for us to be reminded to stay the course. But that's what's happening here for sure. So the pre-markets were continuing downwards. As we've opened this morning, let's see where the markets are officially opening now that it is 9:30 Eastern Standard Time on Monday, April the 7th. The Dow Jones is right around 3.5% negative. The S&P 500, 4% negative. And the NASDAQ hanging right around 4.33% negative there. So, of course, the market's continuing in that direction that we have seen since late last week.
And not surprising either.
Yeah,
if you listen
exactly
to Shana's
right.
In the Know
exactly
on Friday,
right.
She said, yes, expect more volatility for
sure.
the next several weeks probably.
Well said, Sam. And I would highly encourage you all, not only should you go listen to the In the Know from Friday, you can also get that, by the way, on our newsletter that we send out every Friday. But I also would encourage you to listen to the interview that I did with Art Alley last week. I believe it was on Thursday. Art had some tremendous things to say about this. We'll be putting this interview on social media later on today as well. But some really good reminders and encouragement for us as we see the volatility around us to, what is it, Sam? Stay the course. Just stay the course. Keep on moving. So,
diamond hands. Hold on.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yep. Let's take a look here, folks. What's looking like this week in the economy, as we'll be keeping an eye on what the markets are doing. Not much to talk about from a economic number perspective today. Tomorrow we get the NFIB Optimism Index for March. We do get the FOMC minutes released on Wednesday in the afternoon from their previous meeting. Thursday we get the core inflation rate for March before the show. Friday we get PPI for March. We get preliminary consumer sentiment for April. The big news on Friday, though, is earnings season for quarter one of 2025 kicks off. We got several big banks, as they often tend to open earnings season. That'll be JP Morgan, BlackRock, Wells Fargo, and some other ones will be reporting as well after the show on Friday. So that's what we can look at this week in the economy here, folks. All right, Sam, let's move now to normally what would be big news, except on a week like we had this past week. But the Federal Reserve did make an interest rate decision on Friday, which I don't know if anybody even knew about that. But Sam, what can you tell us about this? What did the Fed decide here as the markets were going bananas?
Well, maybe why no one was talking about it is that nothing actually happened. Fed Chair Jerome Powell made his announcement on Friday saying, yeah, we're going to keep interest rates steady for right now, unsurprisingly, because of the uncertainty around tariff policy, although he was a little bit more, sanguine about the whole situation, saying that, in the short term, yes, there's going to be some issues with these tariffs. It's going to cause inflation, prices will go up, but he did say over the long term, there's probably not going to be that much of an issue. In fact, he says inflation will likely be pretty stable. Here he is.
Looking ahead, higher tariffs will be working their way through our economy and are likely to raise inflation in coming quarters. Reflecting this, both survey and market-based measures of near-term inflation expectations have moved up. By most measures, longer-term inflation expectations, those beyond just the next few years, remain well anchored and consistent with our 2% inflation goal.
So there you have it. However, he did go on to say that it is possible that tariffs will have a long-term effect. They don't necessarily think that's the case, but still anything can happen. And for that reason, the Fed is waiting for more clarity before actually reducing the rates. Here he is again.
While tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation, it's also possible that the effects could be more persistent. Avoiding that outcome would depend on keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored, on the size of the effects, and on how long it takes for them to pass through fully to prices. Our obligation is to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored and to make certain that a one-time increase in the price level does not become an ongoing inflation problem. We'll continue to carefully monitor the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. We're well positioned to wait for greater clarity before considering any adjustments to our policy stance. It is too soon to say what will be the appropriate path for monetary policy.
All right, Seth.
There it is, always.
Yeah,
right?
Donald Trump, though, was not too thrilled about this. He's still urging the Fed to lower rates. He said this would be a perfect time for Fed Chair Jerome Powell to cut interest rates. He accused him of playing games and playing politics, saying that cutting interest rates would be a big win for America.
Yeah, Sam, again, we go back to this real interesting question of, is the Fed a political organization or is it apolitical? I am of the belief, and Sam, I think you'd agree with me, that there is not a single apolitical person in the world, that we all have political opinions on some level, because politics is based in morality. And so if you have some kind of moral code, you have a political opinion. Now, of course, you can argue, okay, well, does an institution have a political opinion? I would argue that they tend to, because they're run by people. And so I think we're seeing this here, definitely. I'm not surprised that Powell just continues to kind of play we'll just have to wait and see what happens. No big deal here.
Of course, he's not wrong, though.
He's not
this
wrong.
This is a highly volatile, uncertain moment. Anything could happen. Even if you're thinking the tariffs are a good thing and that they are going to have good results, that's not guaranteed. It's not written in the stars. Anything can happen. So he might be right to just cool the brakes just for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sam, I can't help but wonder also if Fed Chair Powell is just waiting out the clock. His term's up in 2026 to be the chair. I don't know if that means he's off the board of the Federal Reserve. I think he might still be on the board after that, but his time as chair will be finished. So I wonder if he's just waiting out the clock with that one too. We'll have to wait and see there. But good stuff there, Sam. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. So no moves there from the Federal Reserve. I have to wonder also if even if there had been a move, if the markets had even noticed. So of course there is no ifs when we talk about what happens in the course of history, which is a good thing. Awesome. Sam, let's get to, so we got a good partner question here that came in from Gary and Belinda that I think is timely for what we're seeing right now in the markets. Let's take a look at this one together, shall we?
Yeah, so Gary and Belinda are asking, in this market downturn, when trying to dollar cost average, should we be putting our money into the existing stocks? Should we be putting new money into existing stocks, that is, or should we put them into new stocks on the buy list?
Well, Gary and Belinda, that's a good question. Let me try to clarify what you're asking there, because the idea of dollar cost averaging presupposes that you already have existing stocks. So the answer to that question would be putting it into those existing stocks. Now, that's not to say that you also shouldn't be looking at new opportunities on the buy list. I personally believe, especially with what we're seeing right now. Obviously, you heard Shana say in the first segment, we want to be cautious about that. It is certainly true. You don't want to catch a falling knife. I think at the same time, you also want to be opportunistic, and I think our partners have an excellent mantra about them, that you're not panicking. You're seeing this as an opportunity. Gary and Belinda, I'd certainly encourage you to see it in that same way. But if we're talking about dollar cost averaging, yeah, that mainly applies to if you're in the situation where you're putting money into your existing stock. So these are positions that you already own, basically. So to answer your question, that would be the answer that I would tell you. Of course, I would also encourage you that if you have the opportunity for new stocks on the buy list and it works with your asset allocation, I think that's really important also. Definitely feel free to take a look at those. The companies that are on the buy list, folks, you can count on this. If we have a company that's on the buy list and you have new money to place, you have the green light to place money into that company. And it's really up to you to make that decision based on your asset allocation. But if it's on the buy list, that means for our purposes, we say green light. If you feel good about it, go for it, basically.
Are you saying, Seth, if it's on the buy list, you can buy it?
That's right.
That's amazing.
The buy list means you can buy. That's right. It doesn't mean you wave buy to it. It means you can buy it if you want to. So yeah, no, it's good stuff. Gary and Belinda, thanks for that question. I appreciate that you're thinking that way. I think that's the right way to think. So good stuff there. All right, folks, coming up next, we've got the Ag Report. We'll get to that on the other side of this break. We'll talk more about what's going on with the tariffs also, and some other things happening here in the markets and the economy, all on financial issues this morning. We are live this morning, Monday, April the 7th, so I hope you'll join the conversation. You can find us on the chat at financialissues.org/live. We're on any of the outlets you watch on social media as well. We'll be right back after this.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
Through the ministry of Preborn, the Financial Issues family has saved tens of thousands of lives of babies. What an amazing job that God has done through you, the Financial Issues family. Would you join us in saving the lives of babies? What an amazing reunion we will have in glory, meeting all the people that we have saved. Please go to preborn.org. That is preborn.org or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn banner.
What separates Crossroads Kids Club from other ministries to reach school-age children? What sets you guys apart?
First of all is our connection with local churches. We mobilize, equip, train, support local church partners. We're right inside the schools. There's a number of ministries that try to serve public school children outside of the school, but we're able to be right there on the campus. Another key thing is just our values. Our highest value is actually relationships. And so we're not a ministry that's driven by a lot of fancy technology or flashy stuff, but rather getting adults who love Jesus and who love kids to sit on the floor with a group of kids, to listen to them, to love them. So I would say the relational emphasis and the simplicity of the model is actually something that makes Crossroads special as well.
Help reach kids with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurSchools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, folks. It's great to be here with you this morning. Seth Udinsky, Sam Case, the Studio A team here. We're having some fun this morning on Financial Issues and hope that you're encouraged and edified by today's show. The markets, as they're looking right now, folks, still very, it's trending very downward here. The Dow Jones is down 3.6%. The S&P 500 also 3.6%. And the NASDAQ cooled off just a tiny bit from what it was about 15 minutes ago, but it's at 3.9% downward. So what we're looking like there on Wall Street. All right, folks, let's hear from Craig Haugaard, our faithful ag reporter, giving us what we need to know with ag price, with the ag markets, egg prices, all that stuff that we need to understand that impacts us, whether you're a farmer or not. I hope you find it edifying. So here's today's ag report with Craig Haugaard.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for April 7th. Well, corn, soybeans, and wheat futures all traded lower Friday after China retaliated against U.S. tariffs. China is now saying that they're going to impose additional tariffs of 34% on all U.S. goods starting on April 10th. Now, the corn market was pretty much unfazed by this announcement, as China's been basically purchasing no corn from the U.S. anyway, and you really don't miss what you never had. On the other side of the coin, Trump reported that he had a productive call with Vietnam and that they want to cut tariffs to zero. Well, at the closing bell, May corn was 2 3/4 cents higher at $4.60 1/4. Soybeans were hammered all session as speculators used soybeans as their mode of response to the China retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. Now, in the short term, there are 600,000 metric tons of unshipped and cancelable U.S. soybeans available for China to make a statement with. Otherwise, China's at the point in the year when their soybean imports normally switch over to South American beans anyway. Well, at the close, we had May beans down 34.5 cents at $9.77 per bushel. Wheat was really without a story on Friday, and that was basically ended up just getting pushed around by the overt bearishness in the other markets. We did see Russian wheat FOB values inch higher by $1 per metric ton. At the closing bell, Minneapolis May wheat was 6 3/4 cents lower at $5.84 Kansas City dropped by 11.5 cents, closed at $5.57 and Chicago was 7 cents lower at $5.29. Cotton futures continue to be negatively impacted by tariff announcements. At the closing bell, May futures were down another 144 points at 63.36. Livestock futures also saw the bloodletting continue. June live cattle were $6.50 lower at $198.20 per hundredweight. May feeder cattle dropped by $8.25, settling at $274.87 per hundred, while June lean hog futures were down the $4 limit, closing at $91.55 per hundredweight. Milk futures are still on a defensive. At the closing bell, we had May futures dropping by 12 cents to close at $16.72. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
Thank you always to Craig Haugaard. We love getting to hear from him every day on the Ag Report. All right, Sam, let's get to some of these tariffs here. So starting with Vietnam, what can you tell us about what's going on here? Let's do that one first.
Well, I'll tell you, Craig kind of stole my thunder there. He mentioned
really
it right in the Ag Report.
He steals my thunder a lot, too. But in his defense, he's one of the most brilliant and handsome guys that I know. So I'm okay with it.
That's why we don't show video feed of him.
Exactly
the Ag Report is all audio.
It wouldn't be fair.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be fair. We could
overwhelm all of
That's
us.
right.
But yes, Vietnam is coming to the table. Actually, according to Trump advisors, they say more than 50 countries over the weekend are now saying, hey, we want to cut some sort of deal before this all takes effect. Trump said on Truth Social he spoke with their general secretary, who told him that Vietnam wants to cut their tariffs down to zero if they're able to make an agreement with the U.S. By the way, Israel is also meeting with Trump today. They don't really have a high tariff rate on the United States, so I think that is more of a relational deal than anything. It won't have too much of an economic impact, but other countries that do have a major economic relationship with the U.S. are coming to the table very soon, including Taiwan, India, and Japan, and like I said, many other countries too. We just don't know the details at this time. This also comes after Ontario Premier Doug Ford said that Canada might be willing to get rid of all tariffs in the U.S. That is, if the U.S. would do the same. He said so last week. Here he is. Oh, let's see if we have that clip. Doug Ford. Hang on.
Again, he believes he's supporting Americans. He said he was going to create jobs, create wealth, reduce inflation. It's worked the total opposite. Inflation.
But do you think it's fair that you have tariffs on a whole number of products?
That's right. And we'd be willing to take those off tomorrow if he took all the tariffs off.
There you go. Doug Ford from Canada. Yeah. Of course, he's not the prime minister, so he's ultimately not the guy who can decide such a thing. But it is still important to note that officials up in Canada, too, who have been pretty tough on this whole tariff game, are even considering, hey, we need to think about this. This is not a good long-term strategy for Canada or the U.S. As far as this whole thing shakes out.
And, you know, Sam, I think that's really the question with all of this is how long-term is Trump intending to go with this? I'll tell you what, we got a good comment there from Brian and Kara. Before I get to that, though, tell us quickly about, because I know Craig mentioned this, but tell us what you have, Sam, about those China tariffs also. That one, My personal opinion, there's probably not going to be much hope that we're going to have a friendly trade relationship with our mortal enemy, China.
China is definitely playing hardball here. President Trump on Friday responding to China's retaliation. China slapped back at Trump. Trump says we're going to do a 34% tariff on China on top of the 20% tariff we have on them. So that's a, 54% tariff. China is now responding with a 34% tariff of their own. Trump slapped back at them saying China played it wrong. They panicked. This is one thing they cannot afford to do. So he is playing tough. We'll have to see how he responds to their response. There's been no update on that as of right now, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we did have a clip there. I don't know if we can get to this one, but I'd be interested to hear what Scott Bessent said about this idea of those retaliatory tariffs.
So Scott Bessent is warning. He's saying, hey, guys, don't respond. It's only going to make things worse. So here he is.
I would advise none of the countries to panic. I wouldn't try to retaliate, because as long as you don't retaliate, this is the high end of the number. And I think the market could have certainty that this is the number barring retaliation. So we've got a ceiling, and then we can see if there's a different floor.
Yeah, so basically he's saying, listen, guys, this is as bad as it's going to get. It can only get better from here. Don't make it worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, I got to tell you, and this is, understanding that there's a lot of implications that could come with these tariffs, just from a raw brass tacks standpoint. I got to say, I appreciate having a leader who is willing to be the bad guy. Now, I'm not saying someone who's like a villain. I'm saying someone who's willing to play hardball, who's willing to do what's necessary for his own country. Folks, it's not a crime to be about your own country. Like you can actually favor your own country over other countries. I don't think that's
why it's called your country.
That's exactly right. I actually believe that that's a biblical concept, that you've been given a country to steward, especially if you're the leader of that country. And so you have to act in that country's best interest. It boggles my mind that other world leaders, like for example, Vladimir Zelensky is allowed to act in the best interest of Ukraine. But when Donald Trump does it for the United States, all of a sudden it's racist, it's evil, he's Hitlerian. It just doesn't make sense to me. He's acting in the best interest of his country. And it is a breath of fresh air to see someone who is willing to make tough decisions and be viewed as a villain on the world stage if it's going to have long-term success.
What's amazing, though, is these other countries aren't viewed as villains on the world stage when they're the ones with the tariffs.
That's exactly
these
right.
These tariffs were all their
right.
idea. Trump didn't just come up with it out of thin air. It's the fact that they had tariffs on us that is causing him to respond. So you don't hear the blame coming on them. They're the guys who started this whole thing.
That's exactly right. It's well said. Sam, we had Brian and Kara there from Illinois said this. Now, I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on this, Sam. So they said, since there are now 50 countries, as you said, wanting to renegotiate trade policies, I'm thinking tariffs are going to be successful. There are U.S. senators now that want tariffs to become permanent. And the question really is any crystal ball on what the administration will do. Sam, do you think these will be permanent, or do you think this is just temporary?
Yeah, I'm really not sure. And Trump kind of talks out of both sides of his mouth, so that either way, whatever happens, he can say, yeah, this is exactly how I planned it. Right. Sometimes he talks like, yes, this is just a negotiating strategy. Other times he talks about it being revenue based, that this is the whole purpose of this is to bring revenue into the United States. So I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if it would be too successful to have them be permanent unless you radically cut taxes, or else you're just having an additional tax, which tariffs ultimately are. They're a type of consumption tax on top of existing taxes. I think the only way you could institute a permanent tariff regime is if you got rid of most of, if not all, other forms of taxes.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Now, that could be successful. I mean, you heard Jason say in the beginning of their segment with Shana, said something about how he would be in favor of the complete deletion of taxes. I would love that as well.
But would Congress get on board with that?
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. Sam, for that reason, I agree with you. I think I can go out on a limb and say I don't think they'll be permanent. I don't think so. I think that Trump has something else going on here that he certainly wants to make these successful, but I agree with you completely. If they're going to be permanent, then the only success would be from the severe lowering of taxes here stateside.
The fact he's celebrating a potential deal with Vietnam suggests to me the goal is to get rid of them eventually.
Exactly.
Most of them.
Exactly. Absolutely. So obviously, look, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know. We're not God. But just trying to read the room to see what's going on here and to use history as a guide for sure, I think is a wise thing for us to do. Boy, interesting show here, folks. We'll keep it going here, God willing, tomorrow. We'll keep an eye on what the markets are doing and all of that. Make sure you got your questions teed up early tomorrow. Shana will be live with us. So make sure she'll be live at least for the first part of the show. Make sure you get those questions in early. We want to hear from you at 610-363-1110. But until then, folks, remember, everything you have belongs to the Lord. He is in control. He is on the throne, and we can take great comfort in that truth. God bless you all, and Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow for more financial issues. Have a great day.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.